Jews and food. Something's going on over there. And it goes back thousands of years. In about a week, we're going to be celebrating Pesach B'ezrat Hashem. Let me tell you something amazing. You know, I'm here in a Persian community. I'm sure many of you have an amazing minhag, which I grew up with, that when it comes to the Pesach Seder, we like to beat up family members. What's better, my friends, than taking a scallion and giving your brother, ideally an older brother, a father, a mother, a cousin, maybe a grandparent, a good smack with an onion on Pesach Seder? Put your hands up if you have that beautiful minhag. I grew up at the end of the Pesach Seder with green stripes on my shirt, smelling like an onion. You know what this minhag is really all about? I discovered it fairly recently. It goes back thousands of years. When the Jewish people left Egypt, they complained about one thing. They said, Moshe Rabbeinu, back in Mitzrayim, yeah, we were slaves, we were avadim, but you know what? We had avatichim, watermelons. We had shum, we had garlic. We had basar dagim. And here we have man. And you know what else we had back in Egypt? We also had batzal onions. We want to go back. Can you imagine that? The Jewish people have been complaining about food for 3,000 years. It's nothing new. So we take the batzal, the onion, that they complained about, and we're like, oh, this you would take rather than a life of freedom and a responsibility in Torah? That's not good. To remember that, we gently hit our family members to show that this is not worth it. This you need to get a smack with, because we're bigger than that. One of the greatest rabbis in Jewish history was also a doctor, and he spoke a lot about food, and his name was Rav Moshe ben Maimon, the Rambam. He was a doctor, actually, to the Sultan of Egypt. Most people are not aware of this. He was actually put in charge of the Sultan's many, many wives, because the Rambam was so kadosh. He was the only doctor that he could find who would also not try to marry one of his many, many wives as well. He knew he was such a holy Jew that his wives were safe in this rabbi doctor's hands. And the Rambam wrote a lot about health, healing, food, when to eat, what to eat, how to eat. And I want to just run through some of these ideas with you, because this is something which, unfortunately, I went to yeshiva and we never learned this stuff. I mean, you learn the Rambam, Hilchot Yom Kippur, and Sukkah, and Tzedakah. Healthy eating, no. You know what? If the Rambam walked into a kosher supermarket today, here in New York, anywhere else, and he saw the foods that are on the shelves, he would say, yeah, they're kosher, but they are asur, forbidden to eat, because they are so unhealthy. Let me give a couple of examples from the words of the Rambam. First of all, the Rambam says, and this is the halakha according to the Rambam, it's unbelievable. He says the worst thing a person can do is overeat. He actually calls it a sam hamavet. He calls it a poison. Actually, what you're meant to do is to eat just enough to live. As they say, do you live to eat or do you eat to live? Now, we enjoy eating. It tastes good going down. But he says you should eat till you're 3/4 full. That's how much the Rambam says. He says when you're looking at your plate or about to serve yourself from the pot, right? Like my kids, they get out the saucepan, direct from the saucepan. I'm like, we have plates in the house, Baruch Hashem. You can eat from a plate. It's not a big deal. He says, figure out when you're 3/4 full and stop. And then he says, by the way, you should not, that's actually a machloket, I haven't figured out why, between the Rambam and the Shulchan Aruch of Yosef Karo, the great halachic Sephardi decider of halakha. The Rambam says you should not be eating 4 hours before you go to sleep. 4 hours. And the Shulchan Aruch says, the Mechaber says, no, 2 to 3 hours before you go to sleep, you should not eat. I never understood why. And then I saw a documentary when I was growing up on sumo wrestlers. Sumo wrestlers are those big Japanese guys who they're eating like thousands of calories. Most of the food they eat, and they eat a lot of food, is right before they go to bed. They want to eat it, and it stays on so they don't get hungry at all. They're constantly satiated. That's how they stay so large, although in their cases maybe they're pretty fit. For us, we don't do that. The idea of, I guess they call it intermittent fasting, right? Not going to bed with a full stomach, says the Rambam, says the Shulchan Aruch, is a very good and healthy thing to do. Actually, I'll tell you something else the Rambam says. The Rambam tells us that it is impossible, and these are his words, it's impossible to have a real relationship with Hashem, with God, if you're always hungry, always eating the wrong foods, eating breads that have been removed of all the healthy nutrients, eating fish, eating birds and animals that have been force-fed. Imagine that. This is Rambam writing 1,000 years ago. He says, no, brown breads, whole grains. This is what the Rambam says. It's like reading a diet for 2023. That's what the Rambam was telling us. He says, because if you want to know Hashem, you've got to eat well. And he says, many, many Jews are very, very careful about what comes out of their mouth, what they say, not to speak Lashon Hara, and to talk nice things. And that's a great thing. But he says, by the way, you'll notice that your mouth has two doors. It's got teeth and lips. And therefore, that should remind us that not only what goes out, but you've got to be careful what you put in as well. And something can be kosher and yet very, very unhealthy. We are expected to take care of our bodies. It is a mitzvah from the Torah to be shomer aguf, to take care of our bodies. Exercise. The Rambam talks about that as well. Instead of talking about the body, he says that a person every day should try to build up a sweat, and he actually defines it as to increase your breathing. You should do an exercise which is soft or vigorous. What's a soft or easy exercise? So I think something like stretching, or yoga, which I did it once. It was painful, right? But when you do certain exercises where you're doing small movements where your breathing really increases, that is a great thing to do. He says you should do that before you eat. Don't just jump into your food, right? I know we live in a world, but slowly, always thinking about every single bite. And every food that you eat, every mouthful you take actually becomes a tremendous mitzvah, he says, because your goal is to have a healthy body so you can serve Hashem and do the right thing and live a healthy lifestyle. Sleeping as well. He says sleep, and now doctors always talk about this. Sleep is one of the most important things you could do for your health. How long should a person sleep? Put your hands up if you get 5 hours of sleep a night. 6 hours. 7? I try to get about 7 hours. All right? If I sleep more than 7 hours, my kids come in to remind me, no, not on my watch. 8 hours? 9? Wow. 9 hours? Wow. I'm impressed. I'm just telling you right now, God willing, B'ezrat Hashem, you will all have children. You're going to get to a point in your life where the greatest pleasure you have is going to sleep, not going to a restaurant or to a movie or hang out with friends. Going to sleep is the greatest thing. And then you got to figure out how early can I put my kids to sleep that it's not considered child abuse. Say, okay, kids, it's time for bed. It's like, Abba, it's only 6 p.m. I know, but I'm 18 years old. I know. Time to go shluffy. Here we go. Let's go. Yalla. Sleep is an amazing, but it's also a very, very healthy thing. According to the Rambam, you should spend a third of your day of a 24-hour period asleep. It's like 8 hours, right? 8 hours is the sweet spot when it comes to sleep. And going to bed early, we said, and try to wake up with the sun, which is difficult today because, we use a lot of artificial light. But if a person wants to be healthy, what you eat, and when you eat, and when you exercise. He talks a lot about going to the bathroom. I'm not going to discuss that now. Come to me later for a lot of information about that. He says you could tell a lot about a person's health, when, how. I don't want to hear your problems. Every Jew always tells me they've got IBS problems. I don't want to hear. None of my business. But it's something we have to take care of as well. Even how you eat. How you eat is very, very important. As I said, in a few days, we're going to be celebrating Pesach. One of the great mitzvot of Pesach is to lean. Lean. Oh, matzah. Oh, no, forget the matzah. Wow. Talk about not letting my people go. Right? That, my friends, is what matzah is all about. No. What we should do is we should lean. Now we lean to the left, right, and not to the right. Why do we lean? Because we're free people. Avadim hayinu, but now we are cherut, right? We are melachim, or b'nei melachim. We're able to be like kings and to lean back, because when we were slaves in Egypt, there was no sitting back relaxing. But when we lean to the left and not the right. And different opinions. Some say because there's something in your throat, like a flap, and maybe your air pipe opens up, which, by the way, you're not meant to talk while you're eating. Wow. In my family, that's when all the talk comes out. But it's dangerous, and you have to take care of your body. But when you lean to the right as well, it also preserves that, and also your stomach doesn't get too much pressure on it. So the Torah tells us everything. When to eat, how to eat, where to eat. It's all part of our traditions. I'm a rabbi on a Pesach program. I've never seen so much food being consumed. And by the way, people wake up. They go straight to the pre-breakfast, whatever that is. And then some people go pray, come back, they have the official breakfast. And they go straight from that to the tea room. Because there's a 24-hour tea room which is loaded with cookies and cakes. And there's a line to get into the tea room after breakfast that they just ate. Ribbona Shalom, how much you can eat. And then, of course, you go to lunch. And then they have the barbecue between lunch and dinner. And then, of course, there's dinner. And then they have dessert afterwards. It's unbelievable how people want to make up from the years of slavery we went through in Egypt at a Pesach program to go and eat. I don't think the Rambam would be too happy with that as well. The Rambam also says that you should also watch the order you eat your food in. He says you should eat lighter foods and then heavier ones. So let's say you're having salad and then chicken and then you're having beef. He says you start with a lighter food first. Don't start with the beef, because that is going to fill you up and it's going to block all the other lighter foods coming in. So always start with lighter and then heavier, even the order of the food. Most people are amazed when I tell them that Judaism, by the way, the laws I'm telling you are not some weird book. This is in the same book. The Rambam writes this, that he writes about the laws of Pesach, the laws of Tzedakah. It's the same Mishnah Torah. He says, because eating well and sleeping well, let's just summarize everything, and enjoying your food is a tremendous mitzvah, and exercising, all of this is very, very important in order to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to have a real and healthy relationship with Hashem. I want to add one last piece. A person on Shabbat is given a nefesh yetera, a neshama yetera, a soul which is larger. What is that about? What does that mean? A very famous Gemara says you're given an additional soul. Now, when I was a kid and I heard this in yeshiva, and the few times I was listening, I thought, okay, Shabbat special, I get an extra soul. You know, like Oprah, extra soul for you, extra soul for you, extra soul for you. And then I read a Rashi. Rashi says something unbelievable. He says, you know why you need an extra soul in Shabbat? Because you're going to eat more food. And you're going to enjoy it more. And I thought, then why does Hashem just not give us a larger stomach? Why an extra soul? And the answer is because when you're eating holy foods like on Shabbat, and you're using your food as a mitzvah, you're actually making your soul greater as well. And on Shabbat, you're given the ability to add the usual amount. You should be eating better food on Shabbat. Actually, you should walk around during the week thinking about Shabbat every single day, says the Gemara. And the rabbis, our ancestors, would walk around and be like, oh, that's a great piece of meat that they would see. That would be perfect in my choresh on Shabbat. And then you're like, yeah, you know what? It's Tuesday night. I'll eat it now. I'll buy a better piece for tomorrow. And actually, they would do that. They would end up buying better and better food. So on Shabbat, they would have their best foods in order to satiate not just their bodies, but also the neshamot. Because when you eat on Shabbat, you're not only feeding your body, you're also feeding your neshama. That is the power of the extra food and the better food you eat on Shabbat. There were people literally used to fast. this is not for us because we like food too much, who would fast all week just so they can enjoy the food on Shabbat. The Arizal, they say, would only eat meat on Shabbat. That was the only time he would do that. Because he said, the meat is so holy and so special, I want to save that enjoyment only for Shabbat. That is how the Arizal used to act. Let's summarize. Overeating is like a summer mavet. It's the worst thing you should do. Try to just undereat. When you're eating, you should try. It's very difficult. I know most people today, we watch and eat, right? And we work and eat. And very quickly, before we know it, it's like, where's all the food gone? Right? I'm sure there's enough for like 5 people. We want to have a conscientious, mindful eating. It's actually a movement that's happening right now. People are very, very into mindful eating. Think about what to eat. One way that we Jews do that is to make a bracha. A bracha, for those people who make bracha, if you don't, I recommend it. It gives you just a moment, a second or two, to think, you know what? I'm not just an animal that just eats out of the trough or out of the bowl. I'm going to just kind of consecrate this food. The food actually doesn't taste any better when you make a bracha. I wish it was that easy. But it gives you a certain perspective. When you make a bracha, before you eat, it turns that food. According to some rabbis, it literally changes the food. Really, the food belongs to Hashem. When you make a bracha, the food now belongs to you. That's how you don't steal God's food, by making a bracha. You actually change the essence of what that food is. It becomes a holy food just by stopping. Even if you don't feel that connection, which most of us don't, you know. I make many brachot during the day. You drink it down. It's obvious. It's very normal. But even those 2 seconds of contemplation before you eat a food changes your relationship to eating and food in general. Has a major impact. And it's something we need to hear more and more often because it's changing the food, changes our relationship to Hashem, but also changes our relationship to that food as well. And that's a very, very special thing. And sometimes it got to a point now where I see some people just grab food, we're into fast food. Fast food is not a Jewish concept. I mean, we love it. But the idea of just turning up and it's there, ready to go, and there wasn't any effort put into it, happens to be that I think one of the reasons that all these food videos have become so popular, I mean, they're way out of proportion to all the other videos on the internet and social media, is because we enjoy it. I mean, I don't like to cook, I'll be honest with you. It's not something that I do. Ask my wife, whatever. But seeing the process of cooking, something going from basic ingredients to the end process, even though we don't get to eat it by watching, it gives us satisfaction, a feeling of completeness, of from beginning, middle to end. And we're missing out on that because I don't need to go through that process. It's ready, done. I'll buy fast food, ready to eat, and just take it down. So the process and watching, which God will see tonight, something being done in the process and the skill of it, even sometimes we watch it online and they cut it up very nicely for us, it's a certain euphoria, you know, and some kind of just the sounds that come with it and the food preparation and of course the smells. The smells. You walk into your parents' home, or if you're lucky enough, your grandparents' home. I remember growing up, and you smell those foods, especially Pesach, and they take you back. Actually, the sense of smell is the holiest sense that we humans have. Why is that? Because in the Garden of Eden, we sinned, Adam and Eve sinned with all of their senses. They heard God say, don't eat from the tree that you shouldn't eat from. They saw the tree, they touched it, and they tasted it, but nowhere does it say they smelled it, which they obviously did, but it doesn't say that. So the sense of smell is the most purest spiritual sense that we have. And that's why the sense of smell is called lahariach, reach, and spirituality is ruchniut. They're connected. Spirituality and smell are connected. So when you smell those foods that you enjoy so much, they take you back to a special time, whether it's a Pesach, whether it's Shabbat, or visiting a loved one who would make you a special food, because that's how we love to entertain each other. This is how food and eating and preparation connects us and bonds us. And that's why, like we started, one of the worst things that we did in the Midbar was to complain about the food, because that was a lack of gratitude because God was giving us the most amazing foods. Friends, it was a pleasure seeing you all. Welcome to the people here for the first time. We'd love to have you. Again, we're always looking for sponsors for our program, so see myself or Shana afterwards. If you want to sponsor future events, we're here once a month or in other locations, people's homes as well, for eating, enjoying, meeting, and of course, Divrei Torah. My blessing is that God will you all, first will have a very, very Chag, Kasher, V'Sameach, a wonderful Pesach. God will you all build a Bayit Ne'eman, a beautiful home, and the smell of the foods that you or your spouse makes will filter right through your home and will be a sign of beauty and Shabbat and Yom Tov and spirituality for all of you. Thank you all very, very much for being here tonight.